From the time that I was a kid and the earliest that I could remember, I always was able to relate with heroes, not necessarily anti-heroes, but broken heroes. Heroes that were on the edge of madness or losing their complete wherewithal of being. And I would always relate to these kinds of people and these kinds of heroes in stories or myths or legends, because I often felt as though I was already there. I would already experience what they were experiencing. I already knew what they were going through to some degree. I already knew what that felt like. And obviously, many people can relate to heroes. That's why they're heroes, right? And the main difference between the hero and the villain is that the hero is just as broken as the villain, but the hero decides to rise above the pain, whereas the villain just tries to take that pain and push it back on the world. And so as I began to grow older and as I began to follow Christ, something that I learned is there's something else that makes a hero stand out from the villain. And that's being blessed, building something bigger than himself that will outlast him, and simply staying the course. When you are blessed and vigorous in everything that you do, you're going to naturally have this proclivity toward capitalizing on gratitude and reverence and respect. And this is exactly what a hero does. And if you want to be the hero of your own story, which is something that I highly recommend, that is something worth aiming for, at least gauging more of an insight on, then that is going to be something that you can attune yourself to. That's going to be something that you can identify with. And I think a lot of the people in our society are pondering how do they shape their identity. You know, we see identity politics sparking up over the past decade or so, and I don't think there's I don't think there's a coincidence to that. It's because we're so infatuated with vanity that we start to try to place ourselves in things that we're not even really in. And this has a ripple effect on everybody. And I think it's actually okay that we're questioning our identity. We're trying to determine where we're coming from, who we are, and where we want to go. But where things get a little bit awry is when there's all these new different kinds of labels that are being perpetrated into society, and it's causing people to believe that there's something that they're not. And I'm thinking about this topic because I had somebody reach out to me recently, shout out to this person, you'll know who you are, about this kind of topic. And what I began to realize is that this person is yearning for a sense of identity, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a good thing, actually. You want to know who you are, you want to know yourself, you want to have yourself. Because many people in the world have everything, but they don't really have themselves. And this is something that I've preached about very, very often, and something that I will continue to preach, I foresee, for the rest of my life, because there will always be people that have a lot of things, but they don't know how to attain themselves. But I've also learned that part of the blessings that you're going to receive is through understanding who it is that God wants you to be. It's understanding how God wants you to behave. And it's understanding what God wants you to build. Because we were put here to multiply and replenish the earth, right? So we were meant to build and create with God, not just, just filly-diddle around and, whenever Jesus Christ's second coming's back, that's when I'll get started. So many people are saying, "Oh yeah, Jesus Christ is his second coming is soon." It's always going to be soon. Nobody is going to disagree with that. That's actually a follower of Christ. But soon is, when is actually soon? Okay, when is actually soon? nobody knows. Soon could be in the next second, soon could be in 100 years, soon could be in 1,000 years. Who knows? But the thing that we ought to most focus on, though, is how we are going to multiply and replenish the earth while we're here. That's what we're meant to do. That's what we're designed to do. We're not designed to, like, think about this. If the government, or if all of these different kinds of politicians or false leaders, false prophets even, wanted us to believe certain things, they would market society and human beings to be people that would do a 9 to 5 every single day, come home, watch Netflix, and eat pizza and ice cream, and call it a day and do it all over again. Maybe self-medicate with, alcohol on the weekend, or maybe, who knows how often people are going to do that. But all of these different kinds of medication, quote unquote, self-prescription, where you're really just seeking an escape. I don't drink alcohol, and I no longer smoke weed, and I haven't done a psychedelic trip for over 3 years, a full-on trip. So I don't necessarily recommend those anymore. I don't recommend smoking weed unless you're using it for medicinal purposes. And even then, I don't really want to encourage it, because it is an earthly substance. This is something that I've mentioned before, is that when I was in Oregon a few years ago, I had the great privilege of meeting this, and honor of meeting this spiritual mentor and teacher that was by far the most advanced spiritual man I've ever met, to this day even. And even just being in his presence, I felt so light. I just felt as if I could really just be who I am around this person, even if that person or that version of me was disgusting. And that was a weird feeling. It was a very strange feeling. But this man was in his 70s, and he was asking me, because I was having a lot of anxiety at the time, and really, because I was following Christ. I was committed to following Christ, but this was over 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. And I was committed to following Christ, but I was nervous about what I had to do. And I was nervous about what God was calling me to do. And I didn't know if I could live up to what God wanted for me and what God wanted me to be doing. I really didn't. And so when I talked about it to this guy, he said, well, do you smoke weed or anything? Or do you do any of these things? And I said, yeah, I smoke weed, but I don't drink. And every time I do smoke weed, I do it for the purpose of growing closer to me. And he said, well, is weed not a earthly substance? I said, yeah. And he says, well, so are you trying to go to heaven, or are you trying to go to somewhere on earth? Like, are you trying to stay on earth or go to hell, or trying to go to heaven? And I said, well, I'm trying to go to heaven, I suppose, like, if you put it like that. He says, well, then why are you trying to use an earthly substance to go to heavenliness? Blew my mind. I hadn't, to this day, hadn't touched marijuana since. And the reason being is because of that conversation. It completely shifted my understanding of what I'm actually using it for. And you know what's crazy is being sober, staying vigilant. You get closer to yourself in a way that you do have on those substances in some way, but you're also taking on the spirit of weed, or the spirit of the psychedelic, or the spirit of alcohol. And whenever you ingest those things or have those things, and it can be very detrimental to your longevity and what you're trying to build, depending on who you are. For me, it was not necessarily the good thing to do. It was not a very positive thing to look at. It was not a great interaction with myself when I would participate in those kinds of things for long durations of time. Every now and again, it was great because it sparked some kind of new idea or mode of being that I hadn't thought about before, but I don't do that anymore. I don't need it anymore. And that's the goal there, is to just not simply need those things anymore. I don't even drink caffeine or have pre-workout anymore. For my workouts, I haven't had caffeine since September. I haven't gone out to eat since June last year. Okay, and it's March of 2025, just so everybody knows. Like, if you're watching this video down the line, I suppose. But I haven't done any of that kind of stuff, and it's been so sobering in a way that I never thought I knew I needed. And this is a blessing as well. This is a blessing, and even business right now, seeing the evolution of business, because what I've noticed about business is the more you work on yourself, and really the more you work on your business is actually working on yourself. Because your business, if you're an entrepreneur, and I'm not saying, by the way, I ought to have mentioned this earlier, I'm not saying if you're working a 9-to-5 job or you just have a job or whatever that you're just somebody. You're just some nobody, okay? I'm not saying that at all. A job is a job, and I respect anybody that has a job and is, because I don't know their story. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how they got to where they are. So I'm going to treat that person with respect because I don't know what they did, and I don't know what happened. They could have had an entrepreneur mindset, and they could have started their business, or they lost it all and now they're doing something else. I don't know, but I know that that person's going to get back up. And I know people at 9-to-5, it's not all supposed to be like there's so much more to the 9-to-5 than just the 9-to-5, if you guys catch my drift there. But it is what it is. That's the main goal to take away from. But something that I've noticed with business as well is the more that you build yourself, the more you're going to naturally build your business. And it's going to be kind of like a plant where, you know how sometimes with plants you have to cut off the dead parts or whatnot so that it can grow better. That's the exact same way that you look at your life. That's the exact same way that you need to establish your ways of moving in the world so that you can look at your life, look at what's happening, understand the landscape and the domain in which you're operating in, and then move with a strategic mode of being as well going forward, based on the presupposition that you are doing anything and everything possible to establish congruency and harmony with God and His will. That's it right there. And God will reward you for not giving up. Even when things seem bleak, God will reward you for not giving up. And He won't always reward you in the same way that you might think that you ought to be rewarded. Sometimes the reward that God gives us is not necessarily something that we think that we need, but it's something that God knows we need. And that's enough. That's more than enough to understand, okay, this is how we're working, this is how we're not working. God, Jesus Christ, take the wheel, because seriously, sometimes you just need to do that. Sometimes you just need to let God take the wheel. And I'm not saying you should not try to control what you can control, because part of the Legends of Stoicism class that we have in the Regal Change Academy right now is talking about controlling what we can control and how to establish that. How do I recognize what I can control and what I can't control? This goes back to the identity thing that I was talking about at the beginning of the video here. If you don't have an identity and you don't know who you are, how is it possible for you to even discern what's what? How is it possible for you even to discern what certain things are what and which things are which inside yourself and externally? Because if your attention is scattered internally, you better believe your attention is going to be scattered externally. And I think there's a fine line between having a sense of madness and genius mixed together. There's a great line in Pirates of the Caribbean, and if anybody's seen that, I'm talking about the first one, the Black Pearl, where Jack Sparrow and Will Turner, they're like underneath the water in a boat over their heads, but they're trying to take this ship, And Jack Sparrow has this idea, and Will Turner says, you know, to do this, you have to, like, well, this is completely madness or complete genius, something along those lines. And Jack Sparrow says, it's kind of funny how often those two coincide, isn't it? And this is where I like this mystique and the mysteriousness, but also the cleverness here of the pirate, Jack Sparrow, and how, you know, Will Turner is there with Jack Sparrow to go get his woman and go get the treasure and all that, and be captain again of his ship and all these other things. But that's the journey. That's part of the process, is you have to learn how to use what you have. Sometimes what I've noticed is people get less creative with the more resources that they have to create something. You know, that's crazy. I've even noticed it with myself in my artwork, some of my paintings and such, like here. If I have like an extra tool, in the past I've noticed that I took a little bit more time to overthink than I needed to about what I was creating. Because sometimes art and the navigation of the art world, it's like a dream. You kind of have to allow things to happen and appear to you as you go. Anybody that's done drawing or visual painting or visual artwork of some kind, sometimes I have no clue what I'm going to draw until I draw it. And that's really the fun part of art, where you get to really see where your subconscious mind is at. Because whatever you create is the subconscious image of taking what you know and building something. And again, going back to Genesis, multiplying and replenishing the earth with what we know. And that's the creativity part. That's the cool thing about creativity. But anyways, guys, I do hope that this video was useful and insightful for you. This was a pretty fun one, actually. I got to touch on a lot of different subjects that I think were relevant to the main topic. So we all wrapped it up together and put a bow on it. I do appreciate everybody moving from the YouTube platform over to X, Rumble, and Instagram recently. I appreciate all the supportive DMs that I've been getting as well, and all the emails I've been getting for consultations and information seeking about the Regal Change Academy. That's really cool to see, because what I've realized is, you know, getting a bigger following is great. You know, having more eyes and ears to see what you're doing and how you're operating your businesses is great. But what's really going to matter is, let's say you have 5,000 people in your business that know about you, but they are very loyal people. You know, they're there with you. I'd rather have the 5,000 people than have, you know, 1 million subscribers or whatever, like some of these other people do. But then nobody takes them seriously. Like, they're just there to be there. You know, they're just there to be liked. And I would rather be somebody that is able to provide wisdom and learning, helping people learn and be learned, than to just be liked. So if you do get edified from videos like this, please like or comment on the video. That's the best way to support me for free. And it's, you know, takes a second. So that's super easy for you. Anyways, guys, hope you all have a blessed day. Stay blessed, and peace be with you all. Until next time.